Hello, everybody. My old mic decided it didn't want to work anymore, so I got a new one. And while I was waiting for my new mic to show up, I thought about the way that I wrap up books that I read and wanted to go a different route for 2025. Happy 2025, by the way. I don't think I've said anything or made a video since the new year started. It's already a crazy year. I wanted to change things up because I thought about the videos that I really enjoy doing, and the wrap ups trying to fit 3, 4 books into one video, trying to keep it under a certain time limit, that just doesn't cut it for me. I kind of want to do like a one man book club review situation. So, new mic, new, well, not really a new idea because I've done these videos before. I just have not focused on them as I'm planning to do in 2025. I wish that I could tell you that the first book that I'm going to review this way for 2025 is a 5-star read, but it's not, unfortunately. However, that does not give me permission to just tear the book apart. I hope that in this review, I provide constructive criticism for the things that I didn't particularly like. But there were moments in this book that I did enjoy, and I'm going to highlight those as well. This is You Will Be Mine by Natasha Preston. It's a college slasher thriller set around Valentine's Day. I thought that it would be appropriate. First things first, we need to start in chapter 1 and introduce the characters that we're going to be following the most in this book. We have Lylah. She's the main character. We have Chase, who is Lylah's crush. She's not sure that he likes her back, but I mean, there are hints, and we're going to get into that in a minute. We have Sienna, who was born in Korea and is very fashionable. We have Isaac and Sunny, who are both kind of goofballs. They're more or less the same person, and we're going to get into that later too. And then we have Charlotte, who is the introvert, someone I understand well. We're also introduced to 3 external characters. We have Nora, who's a neighbor who has attempted to, I don't want to say infiltrate. That sounds so bad. She wants to join the friend group, but they've been pushing her away. She's apparently obsessed with Lylah, but their personalities don't necessarily mesh. We have Riley, who is Lylah's brother. Lylah does not like Valentine's Day very much because it's around the time that her parents died 2 years ago, and Riley is the only family that she has remaining, so they, of course, are very close. And then finally, we have Jake, who had a crush on Lylah, attempted to kiss her last year. She found it incredibly inappropriate for him to want to kiss her around the anniversary, the first anniversary of her parents' death. She rejected him, and ever since then, after that, he left campus never to return again. So all those characters are set up. It was a little bit of a character soup situation, but it's okay because I was able to kind of pick out who was important, at least in the moment right now. The group of friends, the roommates, are preparing to go to the theater to attend a Valentine's Day play. One thing you need to know about this college campus is that they do up Valentine's Day like it is one of the biggest holidays of the whole year. This is Valentine's week, and people are already dressing up. There are pranks involved. There are plays and shows. So much build up to Valentine's Day on this campus. And you know what? Fine. Do your thing. It's not me to sit here and say that's unrealistic, because if there's a tradition at that campus that they follow and this happens to be one of them, I would much rather go to a fun college that celebrates every holiday, goes big, than one that's totally boring with absolutely nothing to do. But as they're leaving for the theater, there is a note slipped under the front door addressed to Sunny that says, "Your heart will be mine," written out as like a ransom note. There are The letters are magazine clippings, so it's not like a handwritten note. Assumptions start to circulate whether or not it's a stalker or it's a girl who maybe he slept with who didn't get the hint, because Sonny makes it clear before they leave that he never really has the intention of going any further with the girls that he sleeps with. He doesn't want anything serious. And he doesn't stay until morning because he doesn't want to make the walk of shame. So, could be a secret admirer, could be somebody he spent the night with who maybe didn't understand that it wasn't serious. But right now, for me, Your Heart Will Be Mine, at a time that has been established to contain a lot of pranks and shows and people getting together and being romantic, it didn't really seem so off putting to me, but Lylah, for whatever reason, she picked up on it right away. I kind of wish she would have blended in with the rest of her roommates and just treated it like it was a prank, because this sort of set Lylah up as the intuitive one, the one who knows everything before it happens. And Your Heart Will Be Mine, to me, it doesn't sound that threatening. I feel like tension could have been built a little bit better had she blended in with everybody else and just shrugged it off. But we move on from their townhouse. Sonny discards the note, and once they make it to the theater, they're ushered in 20 minutes early. Since the show hasn't started yet, they want to order drinks, so Chase and Lylah go to the bar. They order, the bartender tells them that somebody has already paid for their drink, so Chase makes a little joke saying that, that now they can order whatever they want because they don't have to pay for it. Lylah doesn't like that too much. But they question who was the person who paid for this, and the bartender lets them know that it was a muscular man in a hoodie who paid for their drinks. While their drinks are being prepared, Lylah and Chase have a little moment. This book is littered with moments between those two, but as the cliche goes, they're interrupted before they could get any further. The bartender shows them another note addressed to Sonny that says TikTok Sonny, and a Polaroid photo of the group sitting around the table, which happens to be Unlucky 13, of course. Going back to Chase and Lylah and their little moment, Chase, we're only like 2 chapters in at this point, 1.5 chapters, and Chase has already been touchy-feely. If this is turning into a friends to lovers plot, then I feel like these hands-on interactions between Chase and Lylah have been going on before the events of this book. I have a hard time believing that it's all just happening right now and Lylah is still totally unsure whether or not Chase likes her. Meanwhile, he's been putting his arms around her. The way that he's been speaking to her has been soft and sweet, minus the gaslighting, because as I said before, Lylah is already on to these notes. She has a much better reason to be onto these notes now that she has TikTok Sunny and a Polaroid photo of the group. That is a little bit more creepy than the first note, but since she's been on this and she's been expressing her concerns, Chase has been kind of gaslighting her. Like, she's been expressing that she's worried about Sunny, and then when she appears upset, when she looks upset, he asks her, "What's wrong? Why are you stressed?" To me, maybe I don't understand what gaslighting is, but I feel like that qualifies as gaslighting when somebody tells you exactly why they're upset and then afterwards you ask them why they're upset. At any rate, though, they assume that it's just Nora pulling a prank because she's been rejected from the friend group so many times. Nora is not a muscular guy. So, I mean, maybe she could have a hoodie, but I don't think that her physical description was ever a muscular man. So, unless she has enlisted the support of someone else to pull this prank on the friends that she so desperately wants, I don't think this is her at all. But as a result of the notes and the photo, Lylah has a difficult time watching the Valentine's Day play. And one trend that the author unfortunately falls into throughout this novel is that we don't really feel what Lylah is feeling. It's very surface level. It's very like, I worry about the notes. And that's not a direct quote or sentence, but you kind of get the gist that it's a little too simple for us to really get into her head and understand exactly what she's feeling. We don't get a sense that she's fidgety. We don't get a sense that she's looking around the theater trying to find the person in the hoodie. We don't have the connection to Lylah as the main character as I feel like we should. There will be some moments in this book that I will go over that do. So the author is very capable of providing us with these feelings, but most of the time it's very surface level and it's very simple. Once the show is finished, I think it might not have even been finished, but Lylah is so worried that she just wants to go home. She wants to go back. She doesn't want to be around here anymore, especially if this person in a hoodie is hiding somewhere and is continuing to watch them. So she convinces the group to go back to the townhouse. However, Sunny conveniently wants to go to either the after party or he wants to find some girl to sleep with. Whatever. He's going to separate himself from the group because, of course, he's the main one who's been threatened so far. And they're just going to let him go. Sienna did ask him if he's sure that he wants to leave because of the notes that he's been receiving. And he was just, blew it off. He's going to go, whatever. It doesn't bother him. But what bugs me about this is that after he's gone, Chase and Isaac insist on leaving as a group because they came as a group. So none of them want to go with Sunny. None of them follow him to make sure that he's okay. They're leaving because Lylah wants to go home. Lylah doesn't even offer to go. She doesn't even change her mind and says, you know what? I'm worried about Sunny. This is about him. Maybe we should just hang out with him. So if he wants to go out, then we should be with him just in case whoever this man in a hoodie is follows him. No, no one considers that outside of Sienna asking if Sunny's okay leaving by himself. And the fact that Chase and Isaac make a note to say we came as a group, we leave as a group after Sunny's gone, that irritates me. That just adds to the fact that this was all convenience for plot's sake. And they just let him go. We know that he's not going to come back. We know that he's going to be the first victim in this case because it's all set up perfectly for him to do it. But this just sets this group up as a crappy group of friends. And Lylah, at this point, it feels like she made it all about her because they're going home because she wanted to go home when she has not been the target of the notes. And when they go outside, they happen to see another note spray painted on one of the buildings across the street that also, I believe, says that your heart will be mine or you will be mine. Something along the line, something similar to the notes that they've received. How did Sunny not see this? Did he see it and did he just brush it off and not tell the group? Because it was right there in front of their faces. They all saw it. They all gawked at it. And still, the five of them, none of them wanted to go after Sunny. They just wanted to go home because Lylah wanted to go home. Pranks are going off around campus. People are dressed up as Cupid. There is a smoke bomb that goes off nearby. And I believe this is Lylah's first glimpse at the man in a hoodie. But I'm not sure. I think they dropped the smoke bomb. It went off and they ran off. I believe she saw him, that he was in a hoodie, but I don't remember that part. The next morning, as you could suspect, Sunny has not returned home. Lylah and Sienna are always the first ones up, along with Sunny, and because he's not around, they begin to worry again. And what bugs me about this whole situation is that they've set Sunny's status quo. They've said he is not the type of guy who spends the night and stays until morning because he doesn't want to do the walk of shame. But now they're rationalizing it, saying that, oh, it's typical Sonny to be out and sleep around. Maybe he spent the night with a girl and he's still at her house. So they're already going back on his status quo, even though it was already set. It was hearsay, but it was already set. And we're only a few chapters in at this point. They wait until classes are back in session to check and see if Sonny has shown up to one of his classes. Lylah and Chase go to his math class in the morning and they notice that one seat is empty. He is not there. And it's at this point that they finally decide to go to campus security and talk to one of the cops. They talk to Paul. This is the only time we get to talk to Paul, but he's a named character. He was introduced in this chapter. He said that he's going to involve the police, like not just campus police. He's going to take it off campus and involve the police force, the city PD. And it's at this point where I believe the cycle of asking Lylah if she's okay, I think this is either where it begins or it begins to be redundant. Every single chapter, someone asks Lylah if she's okay. I will say now that if this book lost stars due to all of the times that Lylah is asked if she's okay, then the rating for this book would be a black hole. But anyway, Sonny's absence is taking its toll on the roommates. They don't know what's happened to him. Of course, they received all of the notes, but they don't want to believe that he's dead. They want to believe still that he's coming back because there's no concrete evidence that he's actually not alive anymore. There was one scene around this time where they were sitting around, I believe, the kitchen table or the dining room table, and Lylah noticed Sonny's empty chair and she related it back to when she was waiting to hear the news about her parents and the doctors came out and they said that her parents had died. She was told when her parents had their accident around Valentine's Day that they would make a full recovery. She sat around in the waiting room and received news that she did not expect. And now she's comparing that to this situation where everybody's telling her that Sonny's fine, that it's typical Sonny to either this is a prank, an elaborate prank that's pulled by him, or that he is now caught up with some girl and he's decided to just spend time with her. She's being told this. She's being told to expect this outcome, that he's okay, that he'll be back, but he's not back. And so she's comparing it to waiting for her parents for the news. So she gets up from the table and she takes a shower. This was one of the very few moments that I could actually feel what Lylah was feeling. It had that punch that I wish the rest of this book had. This happened in chapter 6. So major props to chapter 6. It was well written, and it only gets better at this point because Lylah and Chase visit the editing suite to work on a project, and when they open the door, they smell this rotten stench coming from the room. They notice Sonny slouched in a chair. Lylah made the comment that it looks like he's asleep, but he's not asleep. She says that his shirt looks weird, but it's actually ripped open as well as his chest. She realistically panics. She freaks out. It's repetitive, screaming. Again, I can actually feel the intensity in that moment. We're introduced to Detective Lena, who Chase and Lylah give their statements to. When they're finished, or around when they're finished, Detective Lena kind of brushes off the situation. And I know that detectives and cops, they want to keep things neutral. They don't want to panic people when they don't need to be panicked. But to tell Lylah and Chase after they saw their friend's body that she saw no reason why Lylah and Chase can't continue life as usual. That's that's pretty infuriating. I don't know if this was just for the sake of the plot, because after this they do kind of just continue life as usual. I don't know, Detective Lena. Read the room a little bit, understand who you're talking to and what they just saw. It's not easy for a couple of students to run across their friend's dead body as it is for a cop to see something that they maybe have seen multiple times. And it's still not easy for cops because I know cops too. And I don't think it gets much easier. But anyway, that's what she said. She thinks it's all coincidental that they just happen to see him or find him in the editing suite that they planned to work in that day on a project. But at this point, it kind of started raising questions to me like, maybe the killer is somebody that we haven't heard from yet, or we haven't heard about, somebody who's unnamed. Who did they book the room with? Because they didn't just go to the room, they actually had to book it first. And like, are there any connections with the faculty at the college that the killer may have? All these questions, none of them were answered. Spoiler alert, but I thought that because chapter 6 was so well written that things were going to pick up, but unfortunately I was wrong. Around this time, Isaac offers Jacob as a suspect. When Chase and Lylah come back to the house, the cops have already notified the roommates that of Sonny's death. I didn't realize at this point that Jake spiraled as much as he did. I know that he left campus after he was rejected by the kiss, but I didn't realize that. I mean, I guess I should have. Maybe it was mentioned in the beginning that it was the kiss that caused him to leave, because the timing was just so convenient that he would leave after being embarrassed and rejected. But yeah, so he's like the primary suspect right now. It's all an assumption why he left and why he could be doing this. Nothing is ever clear, but because he is now already being dragged through the dirt, my suspect list does not include him anymore. It kind of takes him off because at this point it's like, well, if he's the first suspect and he turns out to be the killer, then how anticlimactic would that be? So he's been erased from my suspect list, but he's very firmly the top of theirs. When we find out what the detectives told the roommates, I don't know how detective work is supposed to go. I just assumed that they would tell them that their friend had died. I didn't think that they would tell them that his chest was ripped open. I didn't know that they would tell the roommates exactly what Chase and Lylah were willing to tell. Knowledge is power in a murder investigation, so it seems a bit counterproductive to tell them exactly what happened when the suspect could be in that room as far as the detectives know. And I do want to make a point real quick because I did say what Chase and Lylah were willing to tell their friends. Chase happened to overhear some of the cops talking about how Sonny's heart was removed. That was a detail that Chase and Lylah agreed they would not tell their friends. And so this was a detail that was also left out when the detectives went to the house. So there's just this one big secret about the heart missing, that doesn't last long. The secret, the cat claws its way out of the bag within maybe one or two chapters after this, but that's the big secret that they were just going to keep to themselves. But I still think that the detectives realistically should not have told them how he died, given the fact that even though Jake is being offered as a suspect right now between the roommates, the detectives don't know. They haven't heard anything. They also tell Sienna that the editing suite just happens to be the best place on campus to dispose of a body, which is another thing that I think that detectives ought to keep to themselves. Not only that, but it seems like a bad idea to place a security camera in the back of a building that's obstructed by trees. I think the campus groundskeeper may need to have a word with these detectives and somehow manage this situation. At the end of this chapter, there's a visual for Sunny, and Lylah once again sees a muscular guy with a hoodie. After this, Chase and Lylah go together to, I believe, the dining hall. I could be wrong. It could be the library or something, but they notice a group of people surrounding a bulletin board, like a notice board. There's a lot of commotion, a lot of hubbub around this bulletin board. They look closely and they see this thing that looks like steak or meat stabbed into the board. They take a closer look. They find out it's a heart. They know what they know about Sonny and how he lost his heart. They panic. The police have already been called, so the campus police show up. They assume it's Sonny's heart, but later they find out that it happens to be a pig heart. But what bugs me here is that Chase is still pretending like it's just a prank, despite Lylah worrying that it could be Sonny's heart. It's like, bro, like, take her concerns seriously at this point. You know what happened to your friend. You saw it for yourself. You heard that his heart was missing. So you know that it could possibly be that. So stop acting like all of this is just a prank. It's just a joke. Haha. Somebody's being sick. Yeah, somebody's being sick. But it's around this time that Isaac also receives a note similar to Sonny, slipped under the door. He is Sonny number 2 because I guess the author didn't have enough time to write Sonny, so she just continued his personality with Isaac. And we're going to get into that a little more in moving forward, but I want to try to keep the events as chronological as possible. Because of Isaac's note, they go back to the police station. They show them the note. And it's at this point, I guess, news that Jake is the possible suspect. I assume that reaches the police station because why else would they invite his brother, his sister, and his dad to the police station to give their statements as well? Here we're introduced to Zak, Sarah, and Jake's dad is not named at all. But Chase, who is the guy who's been pretending that everything's a prank, who's supposedly level-headed, who is the object of Lylah's affection, he suddenly pops off on Zak, like Zak is guilty by association because they all assume it's Jake. And since Zak is Jake's brother, he just unleashes on him. I'm not a big fan of these mood swings. I'm not a big fan of the gaslighting so far. We are not quite halfway through the book, but so far Chase has not done anything cute for me. Like, surface level cute, sure, but his personality is so back and forth. But Zak and Sarah are obviously upset that Jake is even being accused at all because they don't want to believe that it's their brother. As a result of Isaac's note, the roommates have protection now because apparently the police force can afford to have a cop shadow each of the roommates. At this time, because they alternate throughout the story, Officer Gray is the cop who is shadowing Lylah at the time, and I really like him. I think he's compassionate. I think he's sweet. Lylah wants to go to the library to study or work on a project, and she asks him permission if she can go in, and he's an older guy, so it's kind of awkward for him to be shadowing her anyway and following her around, but also go into a communal space for teenagers. It's a little weird for him too. But Lylah enters the library and decides not to go any further because she feels like people are talking about her and looking at her. The cop has a little moment with Lylah and tells her that this isn't going to last forever. This feeling isn't going to last forever. And I thought that was really sweet. I like Officer Gray. he doesn't show up a lot except for like 2 chapters. So it turns out that there's a trend in this book that I tend to like the people who aren't who don't have a lot of page time. I tend to put them at the top of the list. But he follows Lylah to a cafe instead, where they run into Zak. We learn at this point that Jake has been completely unreachable. I believe around the time that Sonny died. So it hasn't been that long that Jake has disappeared and has not connected to anyone in his family. There's this assumption that he could be backpacking, but there's this question, and I can't remember if it comes up now or if it comes up later, but whatever, it comes up at some point and it's irrelevant when, really. But they start to assume, like, how is he able to afford to go backpacking and not communicate with anybody when he either didn't finish 1 year of college, he doesn't have a job, he doesn't have any source of income, he's not asking to borrow money at all. So how can he afford to just backpack around Europe when he doesn't really have the means or the ability to do it, really? Um, that question comes up. I'm not sure if it comes up now, but I mean, it's a good thing to ask. And it places him higher up on the suspect list that he's already at the top of. However, we know because his name is the only one that's been coming up as a suspect that he's not the killer. Still, Sarah is upset that he is being blamed at all and shouts profanities at Lylah. They bark at each other back and forth. Officer Gray and Zak attempt to break the girls apart. Officer Gray, I believe, tries to coax Lylah to go in the opposite direction and maybe go home. But of course, at the same time, they continue, she and Sarah continue to yell at each other. And we went from this girl who was afraid that everybody was looking at her and wanted to leave the library to now having a public altercation, a very loud one, at a cafe where people are absolutely looking at her and talking about her. However, in her defense, if somebody came at me the way that Sarah came at her, I don't know if I would be quiet either. When Lylah comes home after this fight, she thinks that she's by herself. Turns out she's not. Chase is there, of course. But once they reunite with each other, there's a commotion outside. Officer Gray and Detective Alexander, who was the shadow keeping track of Chase, they run outside toward the commotion. It turns out Nora is dead. And this was, I was going to say the first death, but this was the only death that got a verbal reaction out of me. I liked Nora more than the primary and secondary characters, even though like she didn't have a line or anything. She was just talked about that she was rejected. She was a wannabe. She wanted to be in their group, their friend group. She just wanted to be their friend, and now she's dead, and it made me a little sad. Like it I didn't expect to have the reaction that I did for anybody in this book, but it turns out Nora was the one. Nora was a character that I liked enough because I felt bad for her. And yeah, she ended up dead. And it was assumed by me that she died because she didn't have protection, like the rest of them. And because she was associated with them, it just made it easier to pick her off because she wasn't part of the friend group. She wasn't a roommate. Therefore, if the serial killer wanted to strike again, she would have been an easy target. But what's so annoying at this point is Sienna, I don't know when she shows up, but she shows up and offers a connection between Jake and Nora. She says that perhaps Jake and Nora had a thing going on, and the reason why Nora wanted to be closer to Lylah and be part of the friend group was so that she could be closer to Jake, who had a crush on Lylah. And at this point, Lylah snaps at Sienna and is like, of course, talk about my relationship with Jake again. Like, she's just trying to make a connection. Sienna is only trying to make this make sense since Jake is the primary suspect. It's like, yeah, these two people, the killer and the girl who just died, yes, they have a connection to you, Lylah. One of them was obsessed with you, wanting to be your friend, and the other one had a crush on you. So, of course, she's going to bring that up just to try to make a connection. This sort of mopey personality that Lylah has, and I do understand that it's the second anniversary of her parents' death, but at the same time, it's almost like she's fishing for sympathy sometimes. They want to make Jake the suspect. They want him to be the killer so that they know who's doing this. So they're trying to do whatever they can to figure out why he could possibly do it. And yes, in this case, it just happens to be that both of them have an association with Lylah. So her going off like that is just it's just kind of annoying. The next two chapters are more or less the same. I don't know if the author just couldn't choose which one to keep, but they more or less follow the same beats and have the exact same outcome. So I'm going to talk about both of them, and then I'm going to share my general thoughts about what I think should have been kept. But chapter 12, the roommates go to a club to try to lure Jake out. They leave Charlotte home alone for some unknown reason. They don't even mention her in the entire chapter. She's just not there. It's just Lylah, Chase, Sienna, and Isaac. Internally, Lylah tells herself that they should not split up. In the beginning, they do. They find like a booth, and Lylah is scanning the room trying to find this man in a hoodie. Sienna, who is the voice of reason at this point, she is the only character really that makes sense to me. So I really like her at this point. She tells Lylah to pretend to be normal or act like it's normal. Don't scan the room because if Jake is there and he catches Lylah scanning the room, then he's going to be suspicious that they have the detectives with them. They don't want to make him suspicious. She and Chase eventually go off on their own. Lylah begins to, I think this is around the time that they dance. I think they go to the dance floor and start to do that because it's around this time where Lylah starts to wonder about a first kiss with Chase, which let's talk about Jake for a second and why he's being so vilified. The reason why Lylah rejected him was because she found him wanting to kiss her to be so inappropriate on the 1 year anniversary of her parents' death that she rejected him, and this resulted in him spiraling to where he dropped out of university and is now suddenly a serial killer. So he's so vilified right now. He's like the top of the suspect list. He's this awful, terrible person because of this rejected kiss. Meanwhile, her friend has just died. Her neighbor has just died. Her ex, well, the guy who used to have a crush on her is supposedly going around killing people. And now she is concerned about her first kiss with Chase. Is this an appropriate time to kiss? This is the time that you want to worry about kissing somebody? This is why this whole romance just does not work with this book, at least not in the way that it was written. I could talk about things that could maybe improve it, but I'm going to wait until the end to talk about that. But just consider that. Like, is this really an appropriate time to kiss? Considering we're vilifying Jake for his inappropriate timing? I don't know. But yeah, so Chase and Lylah are dancing. They don't have their first kiss because once again, they're interrupted when they're having their moment because Lylah sees the man, the muscular man in a hoodie, staring at them. She alerts everybody. Sienna joins the two of them, and lo and behold, Isaac is not with her. So she went from being the voice of reason to me vocalizing idiot out loud. I trusted her. I had so much faith in Sienna that she would be Isaac's eyes. She would keep an eye on him. She would stay with him, but she didn't do it. She left him alone with who she says was some girl that she didn't know. This is exactly what happened to Sunny. This is why Isaac is Sunny number 2, because this started to feel like yet another setup to separate Isaac from the rest of the group. The detectives come in, they start to drag the roommates out, and Lylah is of course concerned about Isaac, which she should be. They're escorted out to the police car. Lylah and Sienna are put into the back seat while Chase decides that he wants to play Mr. Hero and go search for Isaac for himself. This doesn't last very long because luckily Isaac was okay. I think he puts his hands against the back window and scares the girls for a second, but they're immediately relieved because they realize it's actually him. But he should have a bodyguard at all times. He should have somebody looking at him with friggin' binoculars. They should be able to see the blackheads on his nose. He should sleep in somebody else's bedroom, because he is the one who is receiving these threatening notes now, and we know exactly what happened to Sunny. We're not sure if Nora received some of the same notes, but we can only assume, I guess. But yeah, I don't know why so much attention is not being given to Isaac. I don't know why no one really talks about him very much in this. I would be so concerned about this poor guy. And to be honest, I kind of like Isaac. I know that he and Sonny are basically the same person, but he's kind of a doofus. I don't know about you, but I like a himbo, you know? So I'm kind of putting him in that category. He's not bright, but he's kind of cute. He has cute qualities for the little amount that he's actually spoken in this novel. I like him. So protect him. Keep eyes on him, because I don't want him to go in a predictable way, in the same predictable way that Sunny went. I think that's why Nora's death elicited such a reaction out of me, because I did not expect that death at all. And that's really the only one in this whole book that I did not expect. But anyway, when the friends get home, I can't remember if it's the night that they returned home from the club or the morning after, but they receive a white box. The way that it's presented, you already know what's inside it before they even open it, but they consider waiting to give it to the detectives, but Chase is hasty and decides to open it right then and there. They all act like they're so shocked. It turns out to be yet another pig heart. Charlotte runs off to a room by herself while Sienna runs to the bathroom to throw up. The guys are just broing out, I guess. But this is another part where everybody is asking Lylah if she's okay. Charlotte is clearly upset. Sienna is upset to the point of being sick. But Lylah, are you okay? This was not directed at her. Isaac has been receiving notes. The two other girls are just as upset as she is. But she's the one who is constantly getting the pats on the back and the sympathy from everybody else. It drives me crazy. Meanwhile, I want to make this clear that the amount of times that people have asked her if she's okay, she's the main character, and I think she only asks Chase if he's okay twice in this entire book. Just keep that in mind. She gets an "Are you okay?" at least once a chapter, while she doesn't really seem to care about anybody else. Just throwing that out there. But anyway, the reason why chapter 13, that's the one that we're on right now, is so similar to chapter 12 is because they decide to go to a fireworks show this time. Like I said, this campus really likes Valentine's Day. A fireworks show to lure out Jake again. So, second verse, same as the first. Charlotte's left behind. At least this time, we know that Charlotte's left behind. And Lylah says something along the lines of, I don't blame her for not wanting to go. I do. No, I don't blame her. I blame you for not dragging her ass out of the house with this killer around who leaves notes for Isaac, but decides to kill Nora, he could just do the same to Charlotte, leaving her by herself. I know that there are cops around, but this is a book. The author can find a way. What I feel like this is, when I read this, I was thinking that this was going to be just another setup to have Charlotte separated from everybody else, or it's just the author did not want to provide much of a personality for Charlotte because she's such a forgettable character at this point. Her only personality is introvert. They go to the crowded fireworks show. At the end of it, the lights go out. Sienna and Isaac are separated from the group. They are together. Chase and Lylah, of course, are together, but those two also get separated. And at this point, Lylah is grabbed and taken to some alley. The person who grabs her constantly tells her to shh because she keeps fighting. And at the end of it, he ends up biting her and pushing her to the ground. He also laughs, which, if he was Jake or if he was somebody that Lylah happened to know, I feel like a laugh would be something that's difficult to disguise. She makes a note that she never heard Jake say shh before, but I'm sure that she heard him laugh. She said at one point, this was an earlier chapter, that she bumped into the man with a hoodie, and that person disguised his voice. A voice I can understand. That's easy to disguise. A laugh, not really. You can deepen it, but if it's a genuine laugh, the intonation is going to be the same. It feels like that could be familiar. But anyway, the killer apparently wants to be called at this point because he bites her. The detectives show up. They swab it to get a DNA sample, which, by the way, doesn't go anywhere. She is still convinced that it's Jake, but it seems like this chapter, I think I prefer the club chapter over this one because it's still the same result. They're not able to catch him. It seems really weird that he would grab her and want to bite her, and then they'd swab her arm, and that swab goes absolutely no. Like, this was so pointless, and it followed the exact same beats as the club. I would have just kept the club and not had Lylah be grabbed at all because it really didn't add much tension or anything. Maybe this was just the author saying that Lylah has some fight in her, but there will be chapters later that show that she does have a little bit of agency. But it's at this point that the Jake blame has gotten so out of hand that even the detectives are starting to believe that it's Jake, and they're not really hiding that they suspect that it's him as well. Lylah tells Detective Lena that it might be better if she just leaves town. Maybe he would stop killing her friends if she just left. But Detective Lena advises against it. I believe she says that if Lylah decides to leave, it's out of their jurisdiction. So if Jake decides to follow her, they're the most aware of the case. They have all the evidence so far, all the information. If she decides to leave, then it has to be taken over by another police department. And this whole time, I do need to point out that, like, this whole time, every time the news gets out that somebody on campus is dead, Riley does contact Lylah and asks her to come home. So it's like all of this happening on top of him wanting her to come home is kind of convincing her that maybe it's the best course of action, even though it's not advised. She runs into Zak again on the way to the library. Zak invites her to a bar to chat. So when she tells Chase that she's going to see Zak, Chase gets jealous, and Lylah is so giddy about it. It's this emotional whiplash between these serious moments. She's going to go talk to Zak about his brother, who she's assuming is killing everybody. She goes to tell Chase and is suddenly like giddy. She goes to see Zak, who is now also convinced that Jake is the killer. He goes to the bar. He remembers Lylah's favorite drink. It's a vodka soda. He goes to order it. And this is where the Jake stuff drives me crazy. because we're at the bar. At this point, Detective Alexander is Lila's shadow. He's not paying attention to her. And she notes that. She is so convinced that it's Jake that she allows Zach to go to the bar by himself, get her a drink, and she doesn't expect it to be spiked. I could not be that convinced unless there was hardcore evidence that the person that I suspected was the actual suspect or was the actual perpetrator. You know, I'm sitting here reading this and I know that Zach's not the killer. Like I had that feeling, and I'm gonna explain why towards the end of this review. But she should not trust anybody who isn't maybe Sienna and Charlotte, because at this point it's pretty clear that it's a muscular guy. And that just seems silly. That seems like an oversight from her, something very careless, that someone who in the beginning was so observant and knew right away that these notes were sinister, these notes to Sonny. It seems odd. See, this is the problem with setting a character up that way. I'm just saying. They more or less rehash the same stuff about Jake and believing that it's him. When she returns home, there's almost immediately, I guess. Maybe not immediately. I don't know if she talks to somebody. A lot of these chapters run together, okay? There's a knock on the door. Detective Alexander is standing with Zach. There's a wound on his head, and he so matter-of-factly claims that it was Jake who did it because he recognized Jake by his run. It's not Jake. So somebody else out there in the world has the same stride as Jake. They must, because it is not Jake. His name has been the only one to come up as a suspect this whole time. It is not him. I hate that Zach is that he's going along with all of this too. We do get a little bit more personality from Charlotte, however, around this time, about her family life and how her father is an abusive alcoholic and how her mom abandoned the family. So because she's given a personality at this point, I assume that she doesn't have much time left because it's also at this point that we realize, oh, Isaac isn't back yet. And once again, people are rationalizing it like, oh, Isaac is just like Sonny. He likes to sleep around. He likes to spend the night. And maybe Isaac is a little different from Sonny. It's fine. But where's the cop that's watching him? You know, can they not radio in and ask what's up? Is no one really keeping tabs on these people? Is it really all about Lylah and keeping her safe, even though she's not the one being threatened right now? Well, just kidding. She is, because she was grabbed. But cops are supposed to be watching this whole group. To me, I feel like Isaac should have been put into a cell, like a jail cell, to make sure that he's protected, and then maybe have a shadow as he's going to class or something. And despite being told to stay at the house, Chase and Lylah decide to sneak out because they received a note that said editing suite. I think it was a specific room too, like editing suite number 9 or something, but I can't remember exactly. Whatever the case, they get a note that's the same room that they found Sonny in. They sneak out, they go to the room, they find Isaac's body splayed out on one of the tables with his chest ripped open and his heart missing, similar to how they found Sonny. Because apparently there wasn't enough urgency to cut down the tree that's obstructing the camera, because once again, the body is in the same place, disposed, quote, the same way. And it annoys me that after this, none of the cops at the department receive any accountability. There are no repercussions for allowing Isaac to die, because he just does. And then we move on to Riley calling Lylah again, saying that he's absolutely going to come to campus because he heard about Isaac's death on the news. And they receive a recycled note, "Your heart will be mine," which was just like Sonny's. It's not addressed to anybody this time. But Isaac's death is so forgettable so forgotten, so recycled. Why was he a character in the first place? Like I said, I feel like he was created just because the author wasn't able to really give Sunny a personality, so she passed it on to this guy. And I'm going to talk about later how unimportant he is because it gets even worse than this. He's dead and it gets worse. To have this exact same thing happen twice, to recycle the exact same plot. I did not like this at all. It's like these chapters don't even need to happen. Isaac didn't even need to be a character as much as I liked him compared to everybody else. It just seems like he did not need to be a character if that's how he was going to be treated. But yeah, as I said, Riley said that he's going to come to the campus. He's going to come to campus, and I think that there's an entire chapter pretty much just rehashing everything that we already know. Lylah is explaining everything to Riley to catch him up. She didn't want to worry him because this whole time after their parents' death, he had been looking out for her so much and she didn't want to burden him anymore. So all of these times that he's asked her to come home, she just didn't do it because she didn't want to put that pressure on him to keep her safe from what's going on campus. There was that time where she thought that maybe she would be better off not there anymore, going home, but she was advised against it, and that was really the only time that she had even considered going home. Riley and Chase don't really get along that much because Riley is the protective brother. Speaking of things that Lylah says that don't really make sense considering all the stuff that's happened, she mentions in one of the chapters that she wants to leave the house because she's tired of being cooped up. Meanwhile, this whole group has been going out like normal because it was advised by the detective to just live life as normal. She didn't see a reason why they couldn't. Um, they've been going out this whole time. It seems like going to the club, going to the fireworks show, sneaking out of the house. Like these are things that they do daily anyway. Going to the library, cafe, going to class. It doesn't seem like their routine has really been disrupted all that much. They seem to be enjoying all of the show. Well, not enjoying, but attending all of the shows, the Valentine's Week shows that the campus is putting on. But no, she's tired of being cooped up. So Chase and Lylah have a date night. They're finally able to be together in a romantic way, and they finally have their first kiss of the novel because now, Isaac just died, so it's a perfectly appropriate time to kiss each other. No threat of rejection at all. But, Lylah is the main character. She is the focus. She always gets what she wants. She's so intuitive and so smart and knows exactly when things ought to happen. Of course, this was the perfect time to have that kiss. And it's around this time where I've already pegged the killer at this point. In fact, I pegged the killer back in chapter 8. I'm going to tell you what I said when this is all said and done. But it's around this time where I'm like, man, wouldn't it be awesome if the call was coming from inside the house the whole time? I don't know how the Polaroids would have worked, like the photos of the group, but if Chase were the killer, wouldn't that be neat? Because I did not like him at all throughout this whole book. I didn't like the romance. I felt like it was a disruption. I felt like it interrupted the plot way too often. And so once they finally kissed, I was like, wouldn't it be cool if Chase was the killer? Despite Lylah telling the cops that Chase was with her the whole time. Sunny and Isaac both died overnight when Lylah was sleeping. Like they noticed that they were missing the morning after. And then Nora died across the street when one of the few times that Lylah and Chase were not together. So wouldn't it be cool if Chase was a kid? He's not. I mean, duh. But wouldn't it be cool? See, that's the twist that I wanted. That's the twist that would have bumped this star rating up to 2. But whatever. I already know the killer at this point, so it doesn't. I don't need to speculate about anybody else. After this kiss, after their date night, they receive another envelope that now contains a lock of Lylah's hair. Now it's okay to ask her if she's okay, because now that Isaac is gone, it seems like Lylah is the new target. Outside, there's this police officer, Officer Benjamin. He's been watching the house this whole time. I don't remember if he was named at all, but I do remember that he was named in this particular chapter. He was given a backstory. Either his wife was currently pregnant or she was pregnant and she gave birth to a baby girl recently. So, once again, you give somebody a backstory, they're not going to make it. And it turns out that Lylah and Chase decide that they want to snoop again. They walk outside. They're told by one of the detectives, it doesn't matter, to stay back. They see Officer Benjamin's squad car, the doors open, and they just know that he's been murdered. So at this point, Jake, who they're assuming is the killer, he has finally killed a cop. Now, I wish that with Isaac's death, I wish that the cop death would have happened then, because it would have saved me from not only having to read a repeat of Sonny's murder, but also it would have prevented this question of where was his shadow this whole time? Why was nobody watching him? Why was no one reprimanded for allowing someone to slip by and kill Isaac when all of these college students were supposed to have some sort of protection following them? I wish the cop would have died then, because it wouldn't have been a copy and paste before. It would have been messy, and I love messy killers. We've already established that this killer is a little messy because for whatever reason he decided to grab Lylah and bite her. That's pretty darn messy if you're going to keep that chapter in, which I would not have recommended. But whatever, it was kept in. I don't like when people feel as though they need to kill off characters one by one, especially when it makes more sense and has more impact if chunks of characters are killed off at one time. Sometimes the killer, they run across someone unexpected and they just have to drop them. That could have happened with Isaac. It would have made that death so much more impactful, so much more memorable for the killer to finally like slip up a little bit and have to do a little more work. But I digress. Isaac did not have that much care put into him. And Lylah is now receiving written notes. This one happens to say, "Meet me alone or I strike again." So now that Lylah is the center of the killer's attention, she is the most threatened. According to the pattern, she is the most in danger. She can take cues from what happened to Sonny and Isaac, and she can assume that the same happened to Nora. It's devastating. It's traumatic that she's had to experience all of this. However, the next morning, she wakes up in Chase's arms and says, "It's the best morning ever." Actual sentence. Best morning ever. You are currently the number one target on the serial killer's list, but all because you were being squeezed against Chase's pectorals. This is the best morning ever. Wait until the killer is caught before you qualify a moment in time as the best ever. Please. Immediately after this, though, she thinks the text that she received. I can't remember what the first text is that she received, but she gets another one that tells her to meet at Limbo at 10 p.m. So just to give a little bit of backstory on Limbo, to further solidify Jake at the top of the suspect list, I guess. Limbo is a club that Jake and Lylah, and I assume they're friends too, would frequent when Jake was still on campus. It has since shut down, so it's been pretty dead for about a year or so. There's a for lease sign up, so it's not completely run down and dilapidated like some other abandoned places would be that have been abandoned for a lot longer. Lylah meets with Detective Lena to come up with this plan to, once again, when she finally meets Jake, Detective Lena and I guess some other officers would be close by so that if anything happens, they'll be able to rush in and take him down. They set up this plan for Lylah to walk in through the emergency exit on the back of the bar so that she has better access to the physical bar itself to create a barricade between herself and Jake. When they get there, it's described that it's a busy night. Crowds are flooding the street. Lylah mentions that it would be easy for Jake to blend into the crowd. If anything were to happen, he would just kind of disappear in the group because it is so crowded. One thing I thought was cool was, okay, if you're going to sneak around the back to an abandoned location, you know there are going to be some people back there doing some things like smoking. And it's funny that when I appreciate, as much as I've been saying about this book, I appreciate Natasha Preston for acknowledging the fact that there were smokers in the back. It's this sort of thing that she's so capable of doing. She's so capable of creating a visual. Like, I was adding smokers behind the abandoned bar because I was creating a visual for myself because I did not expect her to do it for me. But she had the same idea. And she added these so that Lylah, these are extra people who could possibly watch Lylah and see her sneak into the building. So she's trying to go in unnoticed. She sneaks into the emergency exit. She goes up to the bar. She sees that there's an upturned table, so she's not actually able to get behind the bar. She takes another step forward. She slips on something gooey. She turns the flashlight on her phone, looks at the floor, sees blood. There's a heart there, and then there's a note saying, "Your heart is mine." She leaves. She panics. She is quickly escorted into the back of the squad car. It's at this moment that she has a full-blown panic attack because she is there wasting her time at the bar while Charlotte, Chase, and Sienna are at home and in danger. This scene, being cooped up in the back of a squad car with absolutely zero control because she is not in the driver's seat literally nor mentally right now because she's full-blown panicking. This is what I've been missing this whole book. This is yet another chapter that I thought was well written. This is the type of urgency that I needed from her. Not all this crushing on Chase, And it could be, like, at this moment, wouldn't it be neat if she realized, because of her close proximity with Chase throughout this whole story, had they not been, flirting or whatever, it would be interesting if at this point she realized just how much she liked him and how much she worried about him. Would have been cool. Didn't happen. Still, very well written chapter. Great atmosphere. I could feel the tension. I could feel her emotions when she had them. At this point, though, Charlotte is gone. Of course, she was given a backstory a few chapters earlier, and now she's missing. Lylah, I don't know if the detectives at this point have told Lylah not to communicate with the killer, but at this point she is texting because she's worried about Charlotte. She texts the killer asking about her whereabouts. The killer says that she's already dead. The detectives believe that that's a lie and that Charlotte is just being used as a pawn. But now that Lylah has been receiving text messages from the killer, I don't know if I was misremembering, because I certainly didn't leave it in any of my notes throughout this book, but I feel like at one point there was a mention of tracking phone activity. I don't know how this works. I don't know how they're able to retrieve that information from phone towers, but I feel like it was mentioned, and I'm like, why are they not tapping into every single roommate's device at this point. If Lylah is receiving texts, couldn't they trace that back? If they were doing that, couldn't they trace that back to maybe one of the towers that it's being pinged off of to get to her? Couldn't they do that? I don't know. It just seems like if this was mentioned before, like if they were tracking Isaac's phone, for example, because I think that was why it was mentioned before. If they were doing that for him, then they should have been doing that for her too. But whatever. Plot conveniences abound. If that were the case, if it were mentioned before, then this just happens to be another one. Lylah asks the detectives if she can respond to the killer stating that Charlotte is already dead, and they said yes, just make sure to play to his ego, help him, make him understand that he has all the power right now. So she sends that text. She asks them what she can do to make him stop, and he responds that he will let her know. The next chapter involves another meeting with Zak. From the moment that they meet, he tells her that there is footage of her exiting Limbo all around social media. So there's a chance that she is being pegged as a suspect right now. And it's a commentary on social media too, where it's like, these people, these strangers who don't know anything that's going on are playing cop. So they're trying to find anything suspicious they can find to peg this act on somebody who is perfectly innocent. We know that Lylah is innocent. But it's kind of funny that Lylah's upset that all this stuff is happening to her when she has been running Jake's name through the dirt this whole time. But again, I digress. While Lylah and Zak are talking, they talk about the wound on Zak's head and how Jake is becoming more bold because he's not only grabbed her, but he's attacked his own brother. She receives a text again from the killer, from the unknown caller, whatever, that says you're with him. It's at this point that Zak knows now that she has been receiving texts from who they all believe is Jake. He has not reached out to Zak at all this whole time, so she apologizes for keeping it secret. Zak's not too bent out of shape about it, but he wishes that Jake would contact him. Zak pretty much confirms that Jake has been pegged as the primary suspect by literally everybody, and it's affecting his whole family now. Sarah continues to be upset, and he says that their father can't even leave his hotel without strangers on the street shouting at him about how much he's failed his children. Interesting, huh? I'm going to put a pin in this and talk about this a little bit later. But I do want to point out that in this chapter, there was a slip by the author where the narration said something along the lines of neither Chase nor Sienna like Zak very much. She conveniently left out Charlotte in this. Not that we necessarily know what Charlotte's thoughts are on Zak, because never once did she talk about Zak, but Sienna really didn't either. But I do find it interesting that Charlotte was left out in this narration, and then in the same chapter towards the end, we find out that Charlotte is in fact dead. She is splayed out on the hood of a car, her same position as the guys. We assume Nora. We didn't actually run across her body, but Charlotte is laid out. Lylah makes this comment that Charlotte has always been this reserved girl who dressed modestly, and all of these people are crowded around her body taking pictures and uploading them to social media. And what a way to find out that your daughter has passed away, even if she didn't have the best relationship with her family, to find her like this in pictures across social media would be devastating. Is not the word. This goes beyond. This is trash. This is awful that people do this, but people do this. I feel horrible for Charlotte because of all the roommates. I feel like I could relate to her more. And once again, she's another character who didn't have a lot of page time. So, of course, I like her a little bit more than Lylah and Chase. Speaking of which, whenever Lylah sees her friends' bodies, so far, up until this point, every single time she's devastated, she reacts accordingly, very realistically. But as soon as she gets home and she sees Chase, it's like, oh, it was such a shitty night. Like spaghetti was dropped in her lap. As soon as she sees Chase, she's fine. The urgency and the tension, all of the emotional impact that happened before is gone the moment she stares into his beautiful green eyes and runs her hands through his soft, dark blonde hair. We're almost done with this whole review. Sorry this has taken so long. She's invited to 5A Baker Street, which is like an abandoned house in a row of abandoned houses. She doesn't tell Chase about this. And since there is more security on the back of the house after Charlotte's disappearance and subsequent death, Lylah is able to sneak out the front. She times her escape with the cop that's sitting out there. When he's not paying attention, she runs off. She goes to the house. She sees a light. She goes towards the light. She sees like this shrine of her. So Polaroids, magazine clippings, all of these things that are like diary entries. I think that was one of them too. Spread throughout this entire room. She sees this man in a hoodie, this muscular man in a hoodie. He finally turns around. He shows his face, and it turns out he is Riley. Now, I have done my best to keep this as under wraps as I possibly could, but I want you to know that I knew he was the killer, and I knew his motive from chapter 8. I said in chapter 8, and I'm paraphrasing because I left voice notes. I said it would be really shitty if Riley was the killer because they've already lost both of their parents. He's the last one remaining. So essentially Lylah would lose him too. But I said in chapter 8, the only reason why I could consider Riley as the killer is if he was jealous that she was spending so much time with her college buddies because, you know, he has been wanting her to come home. Turns out that's exactly why he's the killer. She asks him why he killed the people that he killed. Oh, he tells us that Jake is dead, first of all, and that he practiced on pigs before cutting out Jake's heart. He says that Jake was his first human test subject for this, but when he opens the box of hearts, there are only 4 to represent Sunny, Nora, Isaac, and Charlotte because he fed Jake to the pigs. Sick stuff. And Officer Benjamin was just in the way. He didn't have his heart ripped out. He just happened to catch Riley in the act. But he said that he killed Sunny because Sunny has a big mouth. I mean, as soon as Sunny died, everybody, this is all people talked about, and they all blamed Jake anyway. Apparently, with Nora, he had a thing with Nora. Basically, everything that Sienna said that Lylah got upset about, where she said it was Jake who had a thing with Nora and wanted to get closer to Lylah so that she could be closer to Jake, it's the exact same thing, but with Riley. So Sienna had that perfectly pegged. Riley, whenever he would visit campus, he would befriend all of Lylah's friends, and this included Nora, who he had a thing with. Nora wanted to befriend Lylah and be part of the friend group so that she could be closer to Riley, or so that she could get close to Riley, because I think Riley kind of shoved her aside. So Sienna had it pegged. This is another copy and paste. And then Charlotte, he was mad that Lylah went out to a restaurant with Charlotte one time because Charlotte had a bad grade and needed somebody to talk to and vent to, which is so stupid. How shallow. But I mean, he's a killer, so of course, like, it really doesn't matter. Any motive is a motive, I guess. Isaac, however, did not get a mention at all in this villain monologue, which makes his character even more unimportant. He's not only a copy and paste of Sonny, but Riley just killed him to kill him, I guess. It made absolutely no sense at this. Like, if he has a motive for everybody else, why doesn't he have a motive for Isaac? Isaac really didn't have much of a personality other than being a bit of a doofus and being Sonny's copy paste. So it just seems like the author forgot about him. She didn't care that she created this character named Isaac. She just killed him off to have another body for the count. I would have completely removed him, or, made him important and had the cop die when he died. But no, no, he was just a name on a page in a story. Forgettable. Riley expresses to Lylah that, well, she asks about Chase, right? And Riley is the most angry with Chase since he is like the main focus for her right now. He is her crush. She is in love with him. She says she will do anything for him not to hurt Chase, but he's already texted Chase to come to the house. Like I said, this guy is sloppy when the plot wants him to be sloppy. He texts Chase, Chase shows up, and the detectives show up too. Riley has played this so, quote, smart, other than pulling Lylah away and biting her. He has played this so smart. He knows when the detectives are around. He told Lylah, I don't think I even mentioned this, but he texted Lylah after Charlotte's death or not after Charlotte's death, while she was at Limbo, that he knew that she would betray him. So he knew that the cops were waiting in the wings, ready to jump him. But for whatever reason, texting Chase, who he has not spoken with yet, who he has no loyalty to, which, I mean, nobody really does because he's a serial killer, but still, like, he has not been in communication with this guy. How did he not expect Chase to come with backup? Doesn't make sense. He was so clean up until this point, up until the author had to actually write him as the killer. But he grabs Lylah while the cops are there. He threatens to take her life. He repeats over and over that he's not going to prison. He's not going to prison. Lylah is eventually able to fight her way out of his grasp, where he takes his long blade. He stabs her in the stomach. She starts to fade out as Chase is holding her in his arms, and she closes her eyes, and it's a fade to black at the end. It would be awesome to end the story there, because I would not have expected Lylah to die. But no, there is an epilogue where we find out that Riley is taken to a maximum security psychiatric hospital or facility. It's like the next anniversary after this has all happened. He's being transported to another facility. Chase and Lylah are still together. They're still living together with Sienna, who was the other survivor of the story. They have downsized from a townhome to another house. Oh, forgot to mention. So Sienna didn't die because she was the only one who had ever encouraged Lylah to go home to be with Riley. So that's why Riley completely ignored Sienna. So I just wanted to point that out. They're still living together. They have a roommate situation going on. And then there's another note slipped under the door to disrupt their happy ending that says, "You will be mine," or "Your heart will be mine." And then the story ends on a cliffhanger. That is "You Will Be Mine" by Natasha Preston. There were good moments in this book. Chapter 6 and chapter 23 were fantastic. And there were some other chapters in between that also had their moments. But the repetition, the going back and forth between these really strong, traumatic moments to crushing over Chase, there was such an imbalance there, and constantly asking Lylah if she's okay, even when she's not really the target of these notes at the time. The copying and pasting of certain plot elements, like Sonny and Isaac, their deaths were extremely similar. Those two chapters that were back to back that were about attempting to lure Jake out, and then Sienna's prediction about Jake and Nora actually being true, but applying to Riley instead. These copy and pastes just seemed a bit lazy. I don't know another way to say that. If I were actually editing this and putting my red mark across the page, I would have put that in a comment. I feel like, now that I can actually talk about the romance, I feel like this would have been so much stronger had Chase, Lylah could have had a crush on Chase, and Chase could have been completely oblivious at this time, but because of their close proximity, because of their interactions with the detectives, and the fact that they were kind of in this together and they had to work together, they could have seen something in each other throughout this whole process that could have built their relationship to where once everything was done, everything was settled, the epilogue could have been about them actually being together, so that it wasn't so much of a contrast between all of this shit that was happening to them, seeing their friends die. And it would not have been so hypocritical to blame Jake about his poor timing a year after her parents' death, for him wanting to kiss her, because she was going through the exact same thought process and she blamed him for not being considerate. Meanwhile, Chase's best friends are dying and she's thinking about kissing him too. And this is happening in the moment. This is not an anniversary. This is happening in real time, and she's obsessing about him and wanting to kiss him. Is that appropriate? Is that really appropriate? So at the end of the day, I did end up giving this 1 star, but like I said, there were moments. If it was more consistent, if she took what she did in chapters 6 and 23, I think that this story would have been much stronger. The premise was good, but it kind of fell apart. And the chapters that were good, they weren't strong enough to pull the star rating up. So it is what it is. If you did enjoy this video for whatever reason, do leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already. Otherwise, I've been Jim. You've been great. Happy reading.